used to struggle to get anything out of journaling. I would watch some of my favorite creators talk about how journaling changed their life. They would do morning pages and they found that so impactful. And I would be like, what am I missing here? I would try really hard to journal on my problems. I tried to do morning pages. I tried to journal every day, and I would often feel worse for it, or I would feel more stuck when it came to my problems. If you followed me for a while, you're an OG, I had a good chunk of time where I was like, you know what, journaling just isn't for everyone. I am just not a person that gets anything out of journaling, and that's the way it is. And it really took me years to understand what I was doing wrong. Genuinely years. And in this podcast episode, I want to talk about it. I want to talk about the 4 most important realizations that I had when it came to journaling that actually made a difference, that made journaling feel really helpful and not feel like a total waste of time. And this podcast episode is going to be particularly helpful if you're someone that identifies as more of an intellectualizer, more of an analyzer, someone who thinks maybe a little too much, but you've worked on it / you're working on it. Welcome to Grow With Intention, the podcast for people who want to create a life that feels good. So firstly, let's talk about a really easy mistake to make for those of you who are results oriented. If you are someone who wants to see visible results, you want to make sure you're doing it right, you want to see that you're not wasting your time when it comes to journaling, you are going to block insights from coming your way. For example, you're journaling on a problem. What do I do next with my life? How can I improve my relationships? How can I stop behaving in that weird way? You'll treat it like work. Almost. You'll find yourself impatiently puzzling and analyzing, and you'll try to almost force new perspectives and fresh ideas to appear. And it'll leave you feeling more stuck, which leads me to point 2, which is a bit more helpful. Realizations are not something that you can make happen. Realizations are something that happen to you. You can gently prompt your brain for insight and create space for it to come. You can either nudge your brain and sort of ask for fresh perspectives, and then relax and give those fresh thoughts, those fresh ways of thinking, a little bit of space so that they can bubble up. You cannot force realizations. In the words of Warren Berger, who is the author of A More Beautiful Question, you are like a surfer waiting patiently for a wave to come in. Often, you won't even get the insights that you want when you are journaling. They hit later. But journaling can serve this really great purpose of pointing your mind in the right direction, of giving it the material to think about. You're getting it mulling over all the possibilities and making sure that your subconscious, your unconscious, I always get those two mixed up, mulling over all the different possibilities. Which brings me to my next point. Sometimes you need a little thinking and a little surrendering. Intentional reflection on your problems or on your things that you want to manifest in your life with no desire for immediate solutions can be helpful. But if no insights are coming and you're banging your head against the wall, like trying to pull them out, it might be a time to then lean into surrender and then just create space for them to arrive. I did make a whole podcast episode on surrender. I'm going to have that link down in the show notes, which leads me to my next point, which is that the energy with which you problem solve or the energy with which you manifest, depending on how you want to think about it, it matters. But the most helpful way to think about your manifestations, your problems, whatever you want to call them, is to separate them from yourself. Don't get you involved because you have nothing to do with it. When you start attaching the things that you want to create in your life, the things that you want to fix in your life to your self-worth and to your identity, you end up self-sabotaging a little. When you do this, you'll end up noticing feelings like neediness, worry, rumination maybe. All those kind of things are going to enter the chat. Whereas if you approach journaling about a manifestation, a problem, from the perspective of this is just something that I want to create in my life and it has nothing to do with me, you end up with this gentle, patient, curious energy because it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with how capable you are. It has nothing to do with how you might be perceived. One way that you might do this is to journal more on your systems rather than yourself. And I talked about this in my podcast episode called Maybe You Aren't the Problem, Maybe Your Systems Are. If you are someone who you find yourself being self-focused and not in a cute way and are like, you just bring things back to you, happens to a lot of people, don't worry. It's like really, really common in humanity. Try giving that podcast episode a listen and try journaling from that perspective. In every podcast episode, I give it a little rec of the week for those of you who want to dive deeper into the podcast topic. And today's rec of the week is A More Beautiful Question by Warren Berger. I remember when I read this, I had so many little light bulb moments. I do feel like it took me probably a few years to actually integrate anything that was said in that book, but I look back at the lessons in that book and I'm like, so if you're wanting to journal, it's just like a nice place to start that takes the pressure off, I would say. way, and treats journaling a little bit more like discovery. It actually doesn't talk about journaling, to be clear, but you can definitely use the lessons within it and apply it to journaling. And if you want a podcast episode to listen to after this one, I would recommend the Maybe You Aren't the Problem, Maybe It's Your Systems podcast episode, which I'll also have linked down in the show notes. I appreciate you so much, and I'll see you soon.